enough and a little bit more, but no more than that. And I don't know. I mean, normally you would test each lime to know how much that is, but in the ones we use back in the UK, it's typically around twice the volume of water to the volume of lime. So I'm going to need to put 4 at least in there, and we'll see. So I did test a bit just to see if it was going to spit. One of the issues with modern quick limes from the really big kilns is that when you first give it water, they can fire bullets at you. That doesn't happen with traditionally fired lime at all, and it doesn't happen with all of the commercial ones. It depends on the hard or the soft burning that they do. So that's a warning. There may be a little moment, but actually most of it would be contained by that. But I don't think it's going to happen from the little test. Yeah, I should do a quick health and safety. Obviously, with lime or cement or anything, the main hazard is to your eyes. If you get it in your eye and you don't deal with it, it can blind you. That's as simple as that. It's been the norm in the UK to recommend that if you do get it in your eye, you run water through your eye. But actually the minimum is 20 litres, that's the recommendation. You somehow drizzle 20 litres of water through your eye. And an ophthalmic surgeon who spoke to us about this at a conference suggested, well, come to casualty. Well, at the moment in the UK you might wait 4 hours before you get seen, so you might be blind. And actually water is not, if you've got nothing else, water is the thing to use. But traditionally they use sugary water. So there's sugar in the water. And the other thing that we have in health and safety kits in the UK typically, or in first aid kits, is saline solution. You should not really try and get lime out of your eye with saline either, because these things, I mean, lime and salt lock together very efficiently chemically. Salt is a common ingredient for lime washes for that reason. Sounds totally counterintuitive that you put salt onto the wall of your building, but it's not available to the building because it's locked by the lime. So you really don't want that lock to happen in the tissue of your eye. So sugary water, we use a proprietary version. It's called dipotherine. It's sold by a French chemical company, but essentially it's sugary water. Lime burners I met in Spain a year or so ago, they used to use red wine, and we were talking about the opposite. So the acid neutralising the alkaline, and that's the basic message. The top tip, which I did read in one of the old texts, is if you've got a really crappy wine that's very acid, put a bit of quicklime in it and it becomes palatable. and at Christmas, of course, you get free mulled wine as well. You get free height for your heat in your mulled wine. So that's a top tip. Buy the cheapest wine and put a bit of... So that's the main issue. I mean, as far as getting it on your skin, obviously you don't want it on your skin, but it's actually better if it, in my opinion, only, if it's hot, you know it's there and you take it off your skin very quickly and it doesn't burn you in the meantime. The lime burns I've had in my life have been from NHL or Portland cement, where I really didn't realise they were there, and by the time you know, a lime burn starts at the lowest level of your skin. So by the time you know you've got a problem, it's too late, that's for sure, and a lime burn will be the full depth of your skin. It's like a crater, a flat bottom crater, and it can take a while to heal, but you will get the same burns with Portland cement and hydraulic lime. So the point I'm trying to get across to you is the risk assessment for using this is in no way different to the risk assessment for using Portland cement. You don't want to inhale the dust, and it's not very... I'm going to try and put a little surface in so we don't get dust as we mix, but again, if the dust comes your way, don't breathe it in. Is that a fair enough request? I mean, you don't want to be wearing masks, I don't believe.
Yeah, there is masks.
If you want to wear masks, but it shouldn't. I'm going to try and avoid the dust is not an essential part of this equation, put it that way, but it's, we'll see. So let's go. So what have I got? I've got 2, so I need to get at least 4, and I'll try and put 5 gauges of water in. Now, so there's a little bit of spitting, but it's okay. That's it. There won't be much more. Oh, it's fun. When we do this with young apprentices, this is the bit they like the most, of course. They fall asleep when I'm talking to them, but then they love this. Well, no, I'm banking it over with the sand. So if you remember the Moxon thing, this they consider to be essential, that you keep the spirit of the lime in, but what they mean is the heat. And they're very particular. As I say, I did try and stress that, but the temperature of the slake is critical. And they'll say in some of the old texts that you shouldn't slake lime on a windy day because the wind will steal heat from the slake. So they were really, and so you'll see what's happening now, it's expanding, and they'll say as well, you know, keep closing the cracks up to keep the spirit of the lime in. The Holy Grail, we were talking about this last night, Keith and his daughter and I, that we don't know what it is that makes this process give you a mortar that is so much better than if you make it with a cold pre-slaked putty lime. But we think it's what's happening at the moment. A lot of the slaking is happening with steam, and Moxon says that keep the steam in, and that's in 1703. So that and steam is actually how they slake, as I understand it, the hydrate. They use steam, not water, and that we think is one of the reasons, but we don't know. I mean, there's lots we don't know, but what we do know is it bloody works. You know, that's so and they would do this. They could do this on a grand scale where they fill a pit with loads of lump lime, put the sand over the top, drizzle the water down through, and then leave it to cook. The medieval German for the guy that makes the mortar is mortar cook. So I mean, if nothing else, that tells us they were hot mixing. But you know, so essentially, I don't know this lime obviously, but that won't be far off. And if we left that now, it takes a good while for this temperature to drop, and the sand would become dry. And if we've given it just enough water, we'd end up, as I talked about earlier, with a dry slate, which we could then sieve and take out bigger lumps and so on. But what I would tend to do, and I think what most stonemasons tended to do, bricklayers did like the dry slaking method. When we look at the data, you'll see if you dry slate, the dry slate material gives you a slightly less sticky mortar when you knock it up a few days later. It also gives you earlier, higher flexural strength and earlier, higher compressive strength, but a lower rate of carbonation. So you get these different variations according to the slaking method. But there's no question that the hot mix made straight through to a mortar and used hot has the most porosity, effective porosity, and that's, you know, it's well understood that in Scotland the harling, you know, the render coats were put on very hot, you know, straight on, to maximise the porosity in the mortar. But anyway, so okay, let's have a look. So if we haven't got a meat thermometer here, but we sometimes do that just to see. But if we've given that the right amount of water, the temperature in here is not going to be more than 120 degrees centigrade. It might be, and it should be 100 or thereabouts. If I'd only given it like half the water it needs, then the temperature in there could be 300 degrees centigrade. And we're burning the lime when we let it get that hot, which again they counsel very strongly against. And the main reason being, if you've let the lime get that hot but not given it enough water, you will then have to add more water, and you're going to add cold water to a very hot quicklime, and it freezes it where it is at that point, and you'll get loads of lumps which will never mix in. They're not the lumps that we see in most of the mortars, but they'll never mix in, and so you end up with a mortar that's short, that's not got enough lime in it. So that's one of the main things I've taken from the text. So let's just have a look inside, and we've got what they'd call a paste, so we've given it a little bit more in that situation, and it really, that is not too hot for me to touch at the moment. So I will break that open and start to mix the two together, so when it's very hot, and we've got a mixture of powder and, as I say, paste. You can see that's not putty as we know it, that's paste. And then, so I think we gave it about the right amount of water, so it's not going to be too hot. And but now, obviously, having mixed the two together, we can then add the more water that we need to bring it to a mortar, or we could store it like that, and it would continue to dry down the sand, and you could store it like that. But you know, that's the this idea of storing is, to me as a mason, if you can make it straight through and use it, why wouldn't you do that? That's it in most cases. I've got a text from 1839 in the UK where he says that if you have to mix off-site and take the mortar to site, you would dry slake it. If you're on site, you would slake it straight through to a mortar, and that's a simple thing about weight and transport cost and effort. So a lot of this. So we'll start to add more water. Now if I burn that, when I add this water, we get a real sizzle, a bit like quenching a hot iron. And we used to do that with one of the methods we use, and we'd get that, and I'd say to you, this I'm talking about even a year ago, I'd say, isn't that brilliant? But I was reading a Spanish, Manuel del Rio, and he's saying you mustn't burn the lime because then you'll chill it. And you know if you burn the lime, because when you add the water, it sounds like a red hot iron being quenched in water. So, oh shit. But anyway, but it actually, I have to say in that front, it only matters if you're using lump lime. With powder, it doesn't seem to matter. So, or I wouldn't notice a difference in the mortar, put it that way. Whereas you do if you do it with a lump lime. So, and actually we're not far off, enough water in there. It's just I've got to have the patience now to, because the risk is I'll put too much in. Have we got a hammer, Ben, somewhere? Ben? Oh, okay.
It's a sledge.
That'll help. This is where we're getting a bit like putty lime, yeah, where we have to do all this to try and get it mixed in. But we don't tend to mix like this, I should say. I'm just showing you the traditional way. We would do, if we're using lump limes, we do it in a mixer. And we'd put all of the lump lime and all of the aggregate in together and add a full bucket of water, if the bucket's the gauge. We'd put a full bucket in and then follow it up with a gentle feed of water to bring it straight through to a mortar. So, so we don't do it this way. And the beating of it, you might have picked that up in a few of the texts, but you know the stress on the need to beat the mortars, and you see in the old text they're doing it with like round earth, I think they're really beating it. Some of them put a figure on that. I think in the Parliament building ones, I can't remember the Canadian one, it says 3 hours, but actually others say a typical gauge with about a cubic yard, 8 hours for one man. That's a hell of a lot of work. And that's another thing, Alex, if you're here, that's another thing, we don't understand the significance of that. You know, what are they doing? Is it, I mean, some of it is to incorporate more lime, obviously, the lumps. But actually, I suspect also, a bit like this, it means you can bring the mortar to a workable consistency without adding too much water, which then reduces the shrinkage when you use it. So that's something we really need to explore, I think. But again, obviously in a roller mixer, which is the best way of making these mortars, the machine does that for you. And that's why from the 18th century, on any project of any scale, they would build roller mixers on the site. A pit in the ground, brick lined and so on. So, okay, so I mean, for a typical pointing job, this is actually how Emma and I will mix. We mix like this with the trowel. We don't, because then we've got the option of using it very hot and in small batches. But I think I might be able to put a bit more water in without making it too wet. But I think those of you who are used to the NHL can see it's a little bit different at the moment. It's not sand and water, put it that way. But nice lime, I think. Where's this one from, Matt? Where is he?
Oh, it's from Bedford, I think.
Where?
Bedford, it's like southern.
Yeah, I'm gonna. I just don't want to put too much. That's all.